ready for a deep dive. This time, we're heading into the world of special education, but through a really unique lens. We're going to be exploring the personal journal of a school principal in Israel.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're talking excerpts translated from Hebrew, so it's about as close as we can get to stepping right into his world, experiencing his day-to-day, and really getting a feel for his philosophy on education and potential.
Fascinating. I'm intrigued. Getting insights from another culture's perspective on education, especially one as nuanced as special education, it's invaluable, really.
It is, and trust me, this is not your typical how-to education book. This is raw, this is personal, and some of his insights, they really make you pause and think, wow, I've never thought about it like that before.
I can imagine. So where do we start? Do we jump right into his journal? Or
No. Well, before we get totally immersed in his words, I think it's important to lay down some groundwork, get some context.
Right, of course.
What can you tell us about the backdrop of this story, the Israeli education system, and what makes this principal's perspective so unique?
Okay, so it's important to remember that education is not a one-size-fits-all thing, right?
Yeah.
Different cultures, different resources, all of that plays a huge role in shaping a country's educational approach. In Israel, you've got a really dynamic system, a lot of cultural influences, a lot of expectations.
Right.
And within that context, you have this principal who's working with students who are often labeled, difficult.
Yeah, difficult. Loaded term, isn't it?
It is. Unfortunately, that one word often overshadows a child's potential.
It creates preconceived notions and limits.
Exactly. But this principal, he seems to see right through those labels. He sees potential where others see problems.
And that really comes through in his writing. One of the first things that jumped out at me was this idea of parallel journeys in education. He writes, and I quote, "Learning is a parallel process of the student and the teacher."
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
That's powerful. He's really highlighting the reciprocal nature of education. The fact that it's not just a teacher imparting knowledge onto a student, but rather a shared journey of growth and discovery.
It's like that saying, when one teaches, two learn.
Precisely. And this principle seems to really embrace that philosophy. He's constantly reflecting on his own growth, his own biases even, and how those internal shifts affect his interactions with students, which is fascinating.
It's like he's saying that to be a truly effective educator, you have to also be a dedicated learner, always growing, always questioning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, that's evident in the way he approaches discipline, which is a far cry from your traditional punishments and reward systems.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that. So instead of just trying to control behavior, he's looking for the why.
Yeah, exactly. He's not just asking, how do we get this student to sit still, or how do we stop this behavior? It's more like, what's going on in this student's life that's causing them to act out this way?
And he really gets into this with the story of Amit. Amit's one of the students
Yes.
who initially comes across as really tough, aggressive.
Right, like he's got this wall up.
Exactly. But instead of just writing Amit off as like, oh, this kid's a problem, the principal, he takes the time to really understand Amit's background, his home life.
And he starts to piece together the reasons behind Amit's behavior.
Right. Yeah, and he realizes that a lot of it stems from this deep need for security and stability, which totally changes his approach to interacting with Amit.
It's such a good example of how understanding the why can completely transform a challenging situation.
It's huge, right? Because it's not about fixing the kid, it's about understanding the kid and what they need to thrive.
Exactly. And, that reminds me of something else he writes about the school garden.
Oh, yeah, he talks about that a lot.
He uses it as this beautiful metaphor for nurturing potential in his students.
Yeah, like each student is like a different plant with different needs.
Precisely. He's like, you wouldn't plant a cactus in a swamp and expect it to flourish.
Right.
You have to create the right conditions for each one to grow.
And he even compares like planting the flower bulbs properly can lead to, continuous blooming for several months.
It's all about understanding how to create an environment where learning and growth can happen organically.
Love that analogy. So he's clearly very in tune with his students' needs, but he's also incredibly self-aware, right? Like he doesn't shy away from talking about his own shortcomings.
Not at all. In fact, he embraces those moments of vulnerability.
Which is so refreshing because you don't always see that in someone in a leadership position.
No, you don't. But he's very open about his own struggles, his own biases, and how he's constantly working to overcome them.
And I think that's so important for anyone, especially educators, to acknowledge that they're not perfect, that they're always learning and growing alongside their students.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It all circles back to that idea of the parallel journey.
And it's not all serious introspection and deep thoughts in this journal, is it? I mean, he finds these little moments of joy and humor even in the midst of all the challenges of his job, like his relationship with his colleague, Yaniv.
Oh, yeah.
It's so heartwarming.
Their friendship really comes through.
You can tell they have so much fun together, and they're obviously both so dedicated to those kids.
Absolutely. It's like they have this shared passion for creating this really special, supportive environment where these kids can thrive.
And sometimes that involves, well, building a pond for the school's pet duck.
Right. Talk about going above and beyond.
That story just cracked me up.
Me too. But it also speaks to something really important about his educational philosophy. He sees the value in those unscripted, unplanned moments.
Those times when you just kind of throw out the lesson plan and let things unfold naturally.
Exactly. And he even has a name for it, natural time.
Oh, yeah, he talks about that.
He says those moments, those are just as crucial for learning and growth as anything that happens in a formal classroom setting.
It's like those moments of connection, those shared experiences, those stick with us sometimes even more than like a lecture or a textbook.
Totally. And, he's not just saying this is important for the students. He recognizes that natural time is essential for his own well-being, too. For him, it's those conversations with Yaniv, the quiet moments reflecting in the school garden. It helps him stay grounded,
Keeps him energized and passionate about the work. And that reminds me of another important point. He never loses sight of the fact that teaching is a human endeavor. It's about connecting with other human beings, understanding their individual needs, and really appreciating their unique strengths.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes his insights so universal. Even though he's working within a specific cultural context in Israel, his experiences and his reflections, they resonate with anyone who's ever been a student, a teacher, or a mentor.
And it really all comes back to that idea of parallel journeys, doesn't it? He's learning and growing right alongside his students, constantly being challenged and transformed by those interactions.
It's a beautiful thing to witness, honestly. And it makes you think, how can we all create more of those natural time spaces in our own lives?
I love that question. How can we all be more open to those unexpected learning opportunities, those moments of genuine human connection? It's something to ponder, for sure.
It is.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of special education, or maybe it's a deep dive into the heart of what it means to be a lifelong learner. Either way, I hope this conversation has left you feeling inspired and maybe even a little bit challenged to look at education and personal growth in a whole new light. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds open.